Hello and welcome back to iGCSE Success. And if you're new here, a big hello to you. I'm an English teacher and I post content here on YouTube to prepare students for their Cambridge First Language English exam. And if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to check out the videos on my channel because I break down a number of the core skills needed to succeed with First Language English. So in today's video, we will be revisiting the paper titled An Unwelcome Appearance. You know, that paper about that really angry mum who kind of wants to kill her daughter. Yeah, that one. Of course, not literally. Mum is just very unhappy because her beloved daughter has been staying at this rather dirty hostel. So we will be looking at question 3, the extended writing response or the directed writing response, and the task is a formal letter. So if you feel like you need to brush up on your formal letter writing skills, be sure to stick around for the whole video. And without further ado, let's get on with today's Learn With Me video. Hi guys, so today we will be looking at how to successfully construct a formal letter as a directed writing task or an extended writing response, question 3 for paper 1. And as mentioned, we will be revisiting the fiction piece called An Unwelcome Appearance, and we will be writing a full directed writing response which covers all 3 bullet points. So if you do want to learn with me, make sure you have your notebook and pen ready. As always, I will put the fiction piece in the description box below should you wish to read the full paper. I do recommend that you do read the full text before having a go at this lesson. I won't be reading the full thing just because it makes these videos terribly lengthy. However, I will be reading certain parts. Now, just to remind you of what the paper is about, essentially it centres around an 18-year-old backpacker, and she receives a surprise visit from her parents. She has a rather angry mother, let's put it that way, and she is not entirely happy over where Sasha has been staying. As always, there is a little starter activity which you may wish to do. All you need to do is insert a semicolon where necessary. So there are 5 sentences. I'm just going to read them out. I couldn't believe the mess. It was filthy everywhere I looked. The customer service was terrible. I was shocked to find no one at the reception desk. The light bulb was flickering constantly. It could have blown up at any given moment. The mattresses desperately needed replacing. They were the most uncomfortable things I've ever had the misfortune of sleeping on. And the last one is, I couldn't even open the windows. There was no ventilation at all. So pause the video now if you want to have a little go at the literacy starter. And the answers should be on your screen. Now, hopefully that wasn't too challenging. I've said this before, Cambridge are not a big fan of students who are prolific comma splicers. If you are guilty of using a comma to separate 2 independent clauses, please do try and break that habit. Of course, we could also use full stops, or we could use a suitable conjunction to link the sentences or the 2 ideas together. So if you've not read An Unwelcome Appearance, you may wish to pause the video now and just have a little read of the text before attempting any of the activities on this presentation. Now let's read the question. So imagine you are Mrs. Wilkie. Write a letter to the Public Health Department of the city demanding that Sammy's place be shut down. In your letter, you should write about your concerns about the conditions at the hostel, the mismanagement of the hostel, the likely consequences of allowing the hostel to stay open. Begin your letter with, Dear Public Health Officer, I am writing to alert you to a health and safety hazard. Base your letter on what you have read in text C, but be careful to use your own words. And of course, address all 3 bullet points, right between 250 and 350 words. And 15 marks are available for the content or the reading marks, and 10 marks for your style and writing. However, before we start to tackle the question, have a little go at this little task. And it's just to see if you actually understand the requirements of the question. So all I want you to do is read those sentence starters and see if you can fill in the blanks with some appropriate ideas. So should you wish to have a go at this activity, just pause the video now. So if you've read the text and the question, this should not be too difficult. So let's just quickly go through it. The task is asking me to assume the role of Mrs. Wilkie. That means you really need to understand her character and what type of person she is. This means that I need to make sure my language and overall style reflects her character. From reading the passage, Mrs. Wilkie clearly is... What type of character is she? Well, when she finds out that her daughter has been staying at this god-awful hostel, she becomes almost quite aggressive, quite hostile. She's quite authoritative. She's quite strict. There's certainly this real palpable sense of her frustration, her anger, etc. So how could you show this? Well, maybe you could show this through your sentence structure, using exclamatives, using powerful adjectives to show how she's feeling. And of course, the task is a letter to the public health department. Therefore, you need to make sure your language, of course, is formal. Even though we are dealing with a character who is clearly quite angry, we need to strike the right balance. To structure and develop my ideas, I will be sure to use plenty of, hopefully you put connectives or discourse markers. This will help me get marks for my writing and overall style. There are 15 marks available for reading. I need to try and find 5 pieces of information for each bullet point. Although it doesn't state explicitly in the mark scheme how many points a student should find, they do stipulate that you need to have a range of ideas. So do not lose sleep. Say, for example, you get 554 or 553, as long as you develop your ideas appropriately. I must make sure that my ideas are expressed using my own words. Copying from the passage will result in me losing reading marks. Hopefully you are aware of that anyway. And I will try and aim for 350 words. Although there is a sort of suggested word count, writing about sort of 250 words, I don't think it's necessarily enough. I need to address all 3 bullet points equally, so I will try and write around about 120 words for each paragraph, I think is a good target. Now, I want to say I have looked at the writer's effect for this particular paper. So I'm sure if you've looked at that video, you should be aware of Mrs. Wilkie's concerns and conditions about the hostel. They're pretty grim, pretty putrid. I wouldn't want to stay there. And of course, bullet point 1 is usually quite straightforward. It's just asking you to find 5 relevant ideas, 5 explicit ideas. And of course, then you have to reword and develop appropriately. Let's just have a look at that paragraph. Let's take a read. So her dormitory was actually rather unpleasant. The bunks were thin, worn mattresses were crammed together. There was no shade on the light bulb, which flickered spasmodically. Although everyone was meant to take turns doing basic cleaning and emptying bins, this rarely happened. The window frame seemed welded shut, its surface encrusted with years of dead flies. The surface of the sink in the corner looked like a relief map, with river-like cracks meandering from tap to plug hole and mini mountain ranges moulded from toothpaste. Some lovely imagery there. So, of course, we have the fact that the bunks were thin and there were worn mattresses that were crammed together. So let's quickly highlight that. So I guess Mrs. Wilkie's first concern is that the beds are just uncomfortable. We also have the fact that there was no, can I highlight it? There was no shade on the light bulb, which flickered spasmodically. So we have, I guess, dangerous light fixtures. We also have the fact that the window frame is welded shut. Let's just highlight that one. So that's our third concern. So of course, I guess there's the concern that there is no ventilation. Then we have the fact that the surfaces were encrusted with years of dead flies. That's our fourth idea, the concern being just how unsanitary the hostel is. And of course, a little bit later on, we've got this overwhelming smell of gas. Now, one pitfall you need to try and avoid is lifting phrases from the text. So say, for example, you are writing from the point of view of Mrs. Wilkie and you say, I am incredibly angry. The bunks were thin, the mattresses were worn, the surfaces were encrusted with years of dead flies. You wouldn't get reading marks because you need to reword where appropriate, and certainly words such as encrusted, thin, worn, flickered spasmodically. Those kind of ideas Cambridge expects you to reword. And of course, for each of these ideas, you need to develop appropriately. And what I mean by that, let's just take the window frame seemed welded shut. What are the implications of not being able to open the window? Well, of course, I've mentioned there's no ventilation, but also it's a fire hazard. If there is a fire, you can get yourself into all kinds of bother. Plus, it just adds to just how unpleasant the hostel is. There's no fresh air. I mean, there's flies everywhere. As I said, I wouldn't want to stay at this hostel. So if you are feeling confident, of course, you can simply annotate your paper, or if you are learning with me, you can just jot down some notes. However, when I am teaching students who are new to their first language English journey, I often get them to do a table similar to this one. So we have our 5 concerns: uncomfortable beds, dangerous light fixtures, no ventilation, unsanitary conditions, and of course the smell of gas. And you'll see 2 columns, the second one being where you develop your ideas in the voice of Mrs. Wilkie. So let's take the concern that the beds are uncomfortable. You might want to put something along the lines of, the beds were incredibly close together. I understand that Sammy's place is a hostel, but beds without even an inch of space between them, it's completely unacceptable. Everyone needs at least some privacy. Now let's take a look at the dangerous light fixtures. You might put something like, the lighting, or should I say lack of lighting, made the whole room dull and lifeless. One light bulb was even flickering constantly. So we're not using that adverb spasmodically. Not only was this unpleasant, but also dangerous. What could have happened if a fire started due to this type of neglect? So we are taking the ideas from the text, guys, we are rewording, and we are developing appropriately and in the voice of Mrs. Wilkie. Of course, for the 3 other concerns, well, we've mentioned there being no ventilation. It just makes it highly unpleasant. There's also a sort of fire hazard, the unsanitary conditions, the fact that nowhere is getting cleaned up. There's going to be germs everywhere. People are going to get ill. And of course, the most worrying thing of all is that there is this smell of gas. Incredibly dangerous. There could potentially be some fire hazard or some sort of explosion. It's worrying. Now let's take a look at how we put all of our ideas into a paragraph. So let's take a read. Dear Public Health Officer, I am writing to alert you to a health and safety hazard I recently experienced at Sammy's place. First of all, the beds were incredibly close together. I understand that Sammy's place is a hostel, but beds without even an inch of space between them is completely unacceptable. Everyone needs at least some privacy. Further to this, the conditions of the beds were putrid, completely and utterly putrid. Notice sort of my stylistic choices there, repetition, exclamatives, etc. All of the beds were completely worn, the sheets looked like they hadn't been cleaned in a long time, and of course they were the most uncomfortable things to sleep on. Of course my displeasure doesn't stop there. There were many other things that were completely unacceptable. The lighting, or should I say lack of lighting, made the whole room dull and lifeless. One light bulb was even flickering constantly. Not only was this unpleasant, but also dangerous. What would have happened if a fire had started due to this type of neglect? I also couldn't open the windows to ventilate. This was yet another fire hazard. There was even a potent smell of gas coming from somewhere. It was really quite unbelievable. So if you want to have a go at doing a similar paragraph, use your table or your notes and remember to include 5 ideas. Develop appropriately and make sure you write in the style of Mrs. Wilkie. Now the second bullet point asks you to explore the mismanagement of the hostel. So scan the text again and highlight 5 pieces of information. Again, bullet point 2 is usually quite straightforward. You should be able to find 5 explicit ideas and you can just jot these down on your notepad. And because I'm nice, I've given you a little sentence starter. Secondly, the mismanagement of the hostel left me equally as shocked. Jed, the manager. So if you want to have a go at writing a paragraph for the second bullet point, pause the video now. So let's take a look at a successful paragraph addressing bullet point 2. Secondly, the mismanagement of the hostel left me equally as shocked. Jed, the manager, really has a lot to answer for. Let me start with the ear-deafening music playing late at night. Did Jed do anything about this? Of course he didn't. As you can imagine, it came as a shock to me to find out that Jed was actually part of this chaos, laughing and joining in with my daughter and the other travellers. This was completely unprofessional. Further to this, there were many instances where Jed wasn't even at the reception. Having no security could have resulted in so many things: abduction, assault, or even theft. Jed clearly lacks any managerial skills because there was simply no structure or order at Sammy's place. There were all display boards with all notices haphazardly clinging on. There was no one to supervise the staff, and there was even what I thought to be a gas leak. This also had been left unchecked. Now the last bullet point wants you to address the consequences of allowing the hostel to stay open. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that bullet point 3 can be quite tricky because sometimes the ideas aren't as clear, i.e. it's not easy to find 5 explicit ideas. So you really need to infer and read between the lines. For example, ultimately it could close down forever. It could burn down. There could be some sort of explosion because of the unchecked gas leak. Those are the kind of things that you need to write about. So scan the text again and see if you can jot down some relevant ideas. Now let's take a look at a successful paragraph addressing bullet point 3. I must end this letter by explaining the severity of this matter. Sammy's place needs to be shut down. This hostel is beyond any state of repair. The things I witnessed during my stay were truly quite shocking. If this hostel doesn't stop opening its doors to young, vulnerable people, then something terrible is going to happen. People could get food poisoning due to how dirty the place is. People could get poisoned by the leaking gas. People could catch some disease from the rats which have plagued the entire area. The list really is endless. We are talking about people's lives here, and as a public health officer, I am sure that the well-being of young people is at the forefront of everything you do. I expect this matter to be resolved as a matter of urgency. Yours faithfully, Mrs. Wilkie. What a lovely woman she is. So after having completed all the activities, or at least watching the videos, honestly ask yourself, can you show a clear awareness of the type, audience and purpose? Can you assume the role of a character? Can you use a range of stylistic devices for effect? Can you vary your sentence structures for effect? Can you write a formal letter, I guess with an appropriate register? Can you identify explicit and implicit ideas from a text? And can you use a range of ideas and develop them appropriately? And that's it, guys. I hope this video has helped. Do let me know if you need any further help for question 3 specifically in the comment box below. Thanks. That's all for today, guys. As always, leave your questions, feedback, comments below, and I will be sure to get back to you. Until next time, bye-bye.